Chapter: The Richest State.
Wait, Anastasia. I don't understand how the entire country suddenly became rich. You yourself said that the food produced on a homestead was not subjected to any taxes, so what did the state get rich on?
What do you mean, what? You must think more closely, Vladimir. You're the entrepreneur.
Because I'm an entrepreneur, I know that the state has always tried to collect as much tax from each person as possible. Now, 30 million families have been released from taxes altogether. These families could get rich, of course, but in those conditions the state should definitely go bust.
It didn't. First, unemployment disappeared entirely, since someone who could not find employment in today's usual industry or other commercial or state structure could devote himself fully or partially to work, or put more precisely, to creation on his own homestead. The absence of unemployment immediately freed up financial resources for supporting these people. The provision of food at the expense of these families freed the state from any expenditures on agriculture. But this is not the main thing. Thanks to the many families who had set up their homesteads in accordance with the divine plan, the Russian state received much more revenue than that brought today by the sale of oil, natural gas, and other resources traditionally considered the main sources of income.
What can bring greater profit than oil, gas, and weapons sales?
A lot, Vladimir. For instance, air, water, ethers, contact with the energy of creation, perception of the pleasant.
This is not very clear, Anastasia. Cite specifics. Where did the money come from?
I'll try. The unusual changes in Russia attracted the attention of many people all over the world. The international press began to write about the significant change in most Russians' way of life. This topic became the main one for the majority of people on the whole planet. A huge influx of tourists surged into Russia. There were so many that it was impossible to accept everyone who wanted to come, and many had to wait their turn for several years. Russia's government also had to limit the sojourns of foreign tourists in the country, since many of them, especially the elderly, tried to be in Russia for several months and sometimes even years. Russia's government imposed large levies on each foreigner coming into the country. But this did nothing to reduce the number of people wishing to do so.
But why did they themselves want to be here if they could see it all on television? You said that the press of the whole world reported on life in the new Russia.
People from the different countries also wanted to breathe Russia's air, which had become salubrious, to drink the life-giving water, to taste fruits found nowhere else in the world, to interact with people who had taken strides into the divine millennium, and thereby delight their souls and heal their suffering flesh.
What were these unusual fruits that appeared? What are they called?
The names are the same as before, but the quality is completely different. You yourself know, Vladimir, how much better tomatoes and cucumbers cultivated in open soil under direct sunlight are than hothouse ones. Vegetables and fruits cultivated on land where harmful chemicals are not used are even more delicious and helpful. They become even more so when all kinds of herbs and trees grow nearby. The mood and attitude of the person cultivating the fruits is also significant. The ethers contained in the fruits also hold very great benefit for man.
What are the ethers?
The ethers are the smells. Their presence determines the presence of an ether that nourishes not only the flesh, but also the invisible component of the human being.
I don't understand. You mean the brain?
You could say that the ether strengthen thought energy and nourish the soul. These fruits were cultivated only on Russian homesteads, and their greatest benefit came when they were used on the day of harvest. So people came to Russia from different countries to try these fruits, among other reasons. What was cultivated on the homesteads immediately crowded out not only imported vegetables and fruits, but also what grew on the big common fields. People began to understand and sense the difference in the quality of foods. Today's popular colas and other beverages were replaced by fruit drinks made from natural berries, and the most elite and expensive alcoholic beverages today could not withstand the competition with the beverages prepared on homesteads from natural berries. These beverages also contain beneficial ethers, since the people who prepared them on their homesteads took just a few minutes from the moment of the berries harvest to put them in an infusion or liqueur. An even greater source of income for families living on their homesteads were medicinal plants, which they gathered in their woods, gardens, and nearby meadows. The harvest of medicinal herbs from Russia was preferred over the most expensive drugs manufactured in other countries. But this was true only for the combinations of medicinal herbs gathered on the homesteads, not those grown on specialized farms on big fields. An herb that grows in a big field among plants identical to it cannot take from the earth and air everything necessary and healthful for man. The output from a homestead costs several times more than the output cultivated by the so-called industrial method, but people all over the world still preferred it.
Why did the homesteaders ratchet up the prices so much?
The lower limit was set by the Russian government.
The government? But what does it care? It wasn't levying taxes on the sale of this output. Why is it trying to enrich each separate family?
But after all, Vladimir, the entire state is made up of individual families, which when necessary financed the building of infrastructure in their settlements, schools and roads, for example. Sometimes they invested money in statewide projects. Politicians and economists issued their own programs, but only those which people agreed to invest their money in went through.
Which programs were considered most popular?
The purchase of chemical concerns outside Russia, weapons factories and research centers.
Now that's a change. You said that these families had acquired a divine awareness, goodness. The whole earth began to be transformed into a heavenly garden thanks to them. And here they're buying chemical and weapons businesses.
The purpose of these projects was not to produce toxic chemicals and weapons, but to eliminate the enterprises producing them. The Russian government was engaged in redirecting world financial streams. The money's energy that had cultivated what was lethal for humanity was now directed into eliminating what was lethal.
So the Russian government had enough money for these extravagant projects?
Yes, Russia became not simply the richest country in the world, it became immeasurably richer than all the other countries. All the world's capital flowed into Russia. The rich and people of average means rushed to keep their capital only in Russian banks. Many of the wealthy simply bequeathed their savings to the development of Russian programs. They understood that humanity's future depended on implementing these programs. Foreign tourists who came to Russia, when they saw the new Russians, could no longer live by their former values. They spoke with admiration to their friends and acquaintances about what they had seen, and the stream of tourists increased and brought even more profit to the Russian state.
Tell me, Anastasia, those people living in Siberia, what could they do to be as rich as the people in the central zone? After all, the summer in Siberia is shorter, and you're not going to get very rich from a garden cultivated there.
People in Siberia also began setting up homesteads, Vladimir. The Siberians cultivated on their land what was adapted to their climate, but they also had a great advantage over people living in more southerly regions. The state allocated to Siberian families plots in the taiga, and each family took care of its parcels and gathered their gifts. Beneficial berries and herbs started coming in from Siberia, and cedar nut oil.
How much does cedar oil cost abroad in dollars?
1 metric ton is $4 million.
That's great. Finally, they appreciated its worth, and the price rose 8-fold compared to its old price. I wonder how much of this oil Siberians were manufacturing in a season.
In the year you're seeing now, 3,000 tons of it were produced.
3,000, that's $12 billion they made just for gathering cedar nuts.
More. You've forgotten that a marvelous flour is produced from the pressed nut.
So how much income in dollars, at least on average, did a Siberian family have from their activities?
On average, $3 or $4 million.
Oh, and they weren't taxed either?
No.
So where could they use this money? When I was still working in Siberia, I saw in Siberian villages that anyone who wasn't lazy could support himself on hunting and fishing. And now, this kind of big money.
Like other Russians, they put their money into statewide programs. In the beginning, for example, when people in Russia still hadn't learned to adjust the movement of clouds, the Siberians spent a lot of money on buying airplanes.
What do they need airplanes for?
To keep out clouds containing toxic precipitation. These clouds were formed in countries that still kept up their toxic production. The Siberians' aviation countered the effects.
Did they also hunt only in the parcels of the taigas assigned to them?
Siberians stopped hunting and killing animals altogether. Many of them built summer houses on their parcels where they settled in the summer, during the harvest of herbs, berries, mushrooms and nuts. When they were still small, the newborn animals saw people doing them no harm, and they got used to them as a natural part of their territory and began to interact with and make friends with them. The Siberians taught many animals to help them. For example, the squirrels threw down cedar cones with ripe nuts, and this afforded the squirrels tremendous satisfaction. Some top bears to haul baskets and sacks of nuts and to clear fallen trees.
That's great. Even the bears started helping.
Nothing surprising in that, Vladimir. In times modern men consider ancient, the bear was one of the most irreplaceable helpers in a household. It used its paws to dig up edible tubers, put them in a basket, and drag the basket by a rope to a root cellar dug out not far from man's home. The bear took buckets of honey from the trees growing in the forest and hauled them to man's home and led children into the forest for dainty raspberries, and did much else around the homestead.
That's great. So replaced the plow and the tractor, brought in production, and was a nanny.
And in the winter it slept, requiring no repairs or maintenance. In the spring it came back to the man's home, and man treated the bear to the fruits of autumn.
I see what's happening here with those bears. So their animal reflex was developed, so they thought man was keeping his stores for them alone.
Maybe a reflex, if that notion brings you clarity, but maybe that is what the father intended. I will only say that the tubers were not the main thing for the bear in the spring.
Then what was?
After sleeping in his lair all winter in solitude, after waking in spring, the bear immediately rushed to man to feel his caress and hear his praise, since everything needs man's caress.
Judging from dogs and cats, they do. But what did the other taiga beast do?
Gradually a use was found for the taiga's other inhabitants, and the highest reward for the tame inhabitants of the territory was a kind word, gesture or petting, or scratching of the ones that especially distinguished themselves. Sometimes they were a little jealous, though, if man showed a preference for one of them, and they might quarrel over that.
What did Siberians do in the winter?
They processed the nuts. They did not husk the cones immediately after harvesting, the way it's done now to make them easier to transport, but kept the nuts in their resinous cones. This way the nuts could be kept for several years. Also, in winter, the women did handiwork. For example, a handmade, hand-embroidered shirt woven from nettle fiber is very expensive now. The Siberians received people from different countries in winter and healed them.
Anastasia, but if Russia became so blessed for the person residing in the region, it means many states should want to go to war with Russia, right? Not only that, you said that the arms factories were shut down. That means Russia basically became an agrarian country unprotected from any outside aggressor, right?
Russia did not turn into an agrarian country. It became a world scientific center. Russia started raising arms factories only after a kind of energy was discovered, against which all contemporary weapons were not just useless, but presented a threat to the countries that kept them.
What energy is this? How is it obtained and who made its discovery?
The Atlanteans possessed this energy. They discovered and used it too soon, and that is why Atlantis vanished from the face of the earth. The children of the new Russia rediscovered it.
The children? You'd better tell me everything as it happened, Anastasia.
Fine.
End of chapter. Join us for the next segment of Who Are We? Book 5 of the Ringing Cedar series, May There Be Good on Earth, Part 1.